Congratulations on purchasing your Janome C30 computerized sewing machine. Today in this video, we're going to have a brief overview of the components of this machine and how to do basic things like winding a bobbin, threading your machine, and troubleshooting your tension. The first thing I would like to show you is all the accessories that come with your new Janome C30 sewing machine. So you will receive a buttonhole foot, a presser foot, an E presser foot, which is for a zipper, a pack of needles, a seam ripper, cleaning brush, spool pins, 3 bobbins, 2 different sizes of spool cap, a screwdriver, a dust cover. This is your foot control, and this is your power cord. So you are going to be able to do lots of wonderful things with your new Janome sewing machine. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is plug the sewing machine into a power supply. As we look at the side of our sewing machine, we can see that the foot pedal and the power supply cords are 2 separate cords. So to attach the foot pedal, you will insert the end of the foot pedal cord into the outlet just under the power button. Once your foot pedal and power supply are connected, go ahead and turn the machine on. And you will see it turn on to be in mode number 1, and we can see that there's an LED light that turns on as well. So the first thing I want to show you how to do is how to add the spool pin to the top of your machine. So this comes separate so that everything on top of the machine lays down flat. And if we look at the top of our machine here, we can see the carrying handle, and then we can see there's a spot here for this spool pin to sit. So it just snaps into place right here. And so it holds your thread neatly for sewing. So this spot here is for the additional spool pin if you wanted to wind your bobbin from a different thread, or if you wanted to do twin needle sewing. This is where this little spool pin fits in. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to wind a bobbin. So I have a cone of some Helos Iris cotton quilting thread. So I'm going to unsecure the thread from the bottom of the spool, and I'm going to place the spool onto the spool pin, and then I'm going to use the small spool cap to hold my spool in place. Now I'm going to gently unthread the spool, and I'm going to follow the thread guides and the instructions on the top of the machine. So this is spot number 1. And then for winding a bobbin, you go to spot number 2, which is this tension disc right here. And then you bring your thread along. Next, you would get a bobbin, and you can carefully thread your thread through the top hole on the bobbin, and then put that down. And then the bobbin and the little pin that it's on, it moves to the right. And that tells the machine that you're going to wind a bobbin. So I'm going to use the foot pedal now to wind us a bobbin. When you have your thread secure here, I'm just going to clip this thread tail here, and we'll continue winding our bobbin. So once you have sufficiently wound your bobbin to the level that you want, you can then clip that thread and move the bobbin winding pin back to the right, and remove the bobbin from the pin here. So now our bobbin is wound, and I will show you how to insert it into the sewing machine. The C30 sewing machine has what we call a drop-in bobbin system. So to access where the bobbin goes, you slide this little tab to the right, and the top of the bobbin area will pop open. So just set this aside, you don't want to lose it. And the bobbin goes in like this. So you want to have your bobbin as like a letter P with the tail, with the thread tail coming off of the bobbin on the left hand side. You then place it into the bobbin case, and there's an arrow right here that you follow with your thread and pull it to the back. So that is secured in place. I'm not going to put the cover on yet because we have to pull the bobbin thread up through the hole on the needle plate. And so to do that, we need to thread the rest of the machine. The thread is still set up for threading a bobbin. So I'm just going to remove the thread from that tension disc and follow the numbers that are raised onto the outside of the sewing machine. So this is number 2, and you go down, and then you go around number 3 and go up. And then you want to raise your needle bar so that the hook is here for the top of the threading. So you go through that threading, and there's a little tension disc there. And then you go back down to thread the needle. To thread the needle, you first loop the thread right here on the thread guide above the needle, and then you give yourself a little bit of a tail. The next thing you want to do is press the needle up down button, which is the button just under the display that has the 2 arrows. And so it is going to put your needle down, and then it's going to raise your needle so that it is in the best position for using the built-in needle threader. To use the built-in needle threader, you lower this lever here and bring it forward until the small wire has come through the eye of the needle. You can see that right here. So then I'm going to put the thread under this finger here, and then I'm going to place it under there and gently let go of the needle threader and move it back up, so that now I have a loop of thread here that I can draw through to the back. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pull our bobbin thread up through the middle of the needle plate here. So I'm just going to press that needle up down button again. So I'm going to press it to go down and then press it to go back up. And you can see that that thread has come through now, and now we have a loop of thread under here. So I'm going to pull that to the back, and now we have threaded our bobbin and our needle. At this point, you can replace the little cover on to the bobbin area. That helps keep it clean. And as well, there are markings on the lid to the bobbin area. So now we have threaded our needle and bobbin. Let's take a minute to talk about the bed of the machine. This area here of the machine is what we call the bed of the machine, and this is the throat space. On the face of the machine, we have an LCD display screen that allows you to switch between different modes. So this is the stitch number mode. This would be as to adjust the stitch width. And then when you press it again, this would adjust the stitch length. So you can change those numbers by the keypad right here. So we'll just go back to the number there. This button here is your reverse or back stitch button. This is the lock stitch button, and this is the needle up down button. We can see that the C30 here has 30 different stitches, including 1 buttonhole stitch, several stretch stitches, some decorative stitches, and of course, you can also do blind hem or zigzag or a triple stitch. There's lots of different choices here. So this is a really, really great starting out machine for sewing. On the needle plate of this machine, we can see we've got some grooves here, markings in both inches and in millimeters. As well as on the needle plate itself, there are some other markings that are engraved into the metal of this plate. On the top is inches and on the bottom is millimeters. So you can use the markings on the bobbin cover and on the needle plate to match your seam allowance required if you are quilting or sewing garments, etc. So this Janome sewing machine has a drop-off foot system, so you can press the little lever at the back of the needle bar and remove the presser foot. So these are what we call the feed dogs. These are the components of the sewing machine that advance your fabric through. And if you are having difficulty with maneuvering a thicker fabric, just take a minute to make sure that this is all cleaned out and that there's no lint stuck underneath here. So to access the area underneath the bobbin, you will want to use your screwdriver and remove the screws that are holding the needle plates into the machine. So once you've got them out a little ways, you can probably just go ahead and use your fingers to remove the screw. And then set the screw aside so that you don't lose it. So we'll just keep removing that screw here. So I'll set that aside, and now I'm just going to use the corner of my little screwdriver just to lift up the needle plate so that it can come out. So when we look inside the machine, this is where the bobbin case sits. And so when you are periodically, as you are sewing, you want to make sure that you remove the bobbin case and brush out this inside area with the little lint brush that came with your sewing machine. You'll also notice that there is a little wick here at the bottom of the machine. Don't try to pick that out. That is actually where you would put 1 drop of oil to make sure that the metal workings inside your sewing machine are functioning properly. So you need to oil and clean your machine definitely after every major project. And especially if you live in a drier climate, you would want to check to make sure that this is sufficiently wet with sewing machine oil, which you can purchase from your local Janome dealer. I have now replaced the needle plate on the machine, and I am going to reattach the screws to the needle plate, and I'm doing them a little bit at a time so that I can sink them in evenly. And I also want to be sure that I don't over tighten these, and you just want them finger tight. They don't have to be so tight that you would need to get help to unscrew them. Okay, so now that we have our needle plate back on, we're going to rethread that bobbin. So I'm just going to pop this open here, and I'm going to place my bobbin again like a letter P into the bobbin case and put the thread in this groove and bring it around to the left. And then holding my top thread tail, I'm going to use needle down and needle up to bring that thread loop through. So now we have our machine threaded. So it comes with the A foot, which is a standard presser foot. It comes with the E foot, which is a zipper foot, and this is also very handy for top stitching. It comes with the F foot, which is a clear foot, very similar to the A foot. This is the buttonhole foot that slides back and forth so that you can measure the distance that you need your buttonhole to be. So this is the back and this is the front. Okay, so we are ready to do a buttonhole. So I have marked a buttonhole on this tester scrap of fabric. So I'm going to place that underneath the presser foot. And I'm just going to make sure that I have stitch number 17 selected. And I'm going to move my needle. I want to drop it at the start of my buttonhole, which is right here. So I'm going to lower my foot, and then I'm going to move the buttonhole foot to the very front. And then I'm going to lower the presser foot, and I will stitch the first side. And see, now I have reached the end of my line, so I'm going to press the reverse button, and now it will go forward. And I'll press the reverse button again. And so now it will stitch the bar tack at the end, and then continue stitching the other side of the buttonhole. And now when I have reached the same spot as my other stitches, I will press reverse again, and it will sew the bar tack. So it's all finished. So we'll take the fabric out and trim the threads on the side of the machine. And there we have a little buttonhole. So this is a really fun and easy thing to do. You can use a buttonhole for lots of different things. You can use it as openings for drawstrings. You can even use it as a way to tack down a quilt. I would like to draw your attention to the tension dial of your sewing machine. This dial controls the balance of thread between your top thread and your bobbin thread, and it comes factory set at the number 4. If you are sewing and are having problems with your tension, you can adjust this up or down to see if it will help fix the problem, and detailed instructions for this are inside your manual. If you have adjusted your tension and would like it to go back to normal, I find that scrolling it all the way one way and then back to 4 helps to reset it to the standard tension of number 4 here. So we've spoken earlier about the markings on the needle plate. So I want to show you now how to use this mark to turn a corner. So I'm going to use my scrap of fabric, and I'm going to set my stitch back to number 1. So I'll just go down to get to number 1, and then I'm going to lower my presser foot, and I'm also going to hold on to these tails because it is important to hang on to your thread tails for a few stitches, and I'm just going to sew just a regular straight stitch. So now when I lift it, there we go. I'm right on the edge, so now I can continue sewing around the corner. And then I'm going to press needle up, lift my presser foot, pull it gently to the back, and cut the threads, and you can see that I've turned the corner. I have now switched my presser foot to the clear F foot because I would like to show you how to do some decorative stitches and also the purpose of the lock stitch. So I am going to choose stitch number 23. And I'm actually going to go backwards because 23 is closer to 30 than it is to 1. So now I have it set to stitch number 23, and the machine will automatically determine the stitch width and the stitch length for you. You can also adjust those if you wish, but I'm just going to use the default settings right now. So I'm going to put my presser foot down and hang on to my tails and begin sewing. So I'm doing this little zigzag stitch, and if I press the lock button, it will come to the end of a repeat and do a locking stitch, which helps to secure your threads in place without backstitching. So then I lift the presser foot up and I pull the threads out, and we can see that we have a cute little edge stitch. So you can use this as top stitching on anything, or you can use it to join 2 pieces of fabric. There's lots of ways you can use this one. As well, this machine has a few satin stitches, so I'm going to increase the stitch to number 28, which is a satin stitch, and I'm going to show you how that one works. So I'm going to lower the presser foot, and so now I will hold my tails and I will begin stitching. So it's going to do that satin stitch, and if I'm in the middle of the satin stitch, and I know that I just want one more, I can press the lock stitch and it will come to the end of the satin stitch and do some tie off stitches and then stop, so that then I can take the threads and I can see that we've got a really beautiful satin stitch. I would like to show you now how to use the E foot for top stitching. We have installed the E foot onto the sewing machine ankle on the left hand side. But we can see that the needle is not in the right position. If we were to start sewing right now, our needle would hit the presser foot, which we don't want. So I'm going to adjust my stitches to make sure that I am in a straight stitch, which is stitch number 1. And as you can see, the needle moved back into the proper position of being in the middle of the foot. So now when I place my fabric underneath, I can use the 1/8 seam allowance line right here and do a nice top stitch right along the edge of the fold line. So if you were doing this on a zipper, you would want to make sure that the edge of your foot was lined up right next to the zipper edge. To change which side of the zipper you're sewing on, you can loosen the zipper foot down and replace it with it being on the right side. And now the needle is on the right side of the foot, and you can stitch on the other side of a zipper. So if we were going to stitch on another edge, this is what it would look like. And so we've got some nice straight stitches there. This machine sews absolutely beautifully, and you can do lots and lots with this machine. I'd like to show you next how to do a blind hem. A blind hem finish is very popular in garment making, and it allows you to sew almost an invisible hem onto the bottom edge of a garment. So today you're going to see the stitches because I have blue thread and red fabric. So what I'm going to do is, this is how I want my hem to be. So I'm going to also fold it back on itself like an accordion so that I have an inside folded edge and my raw edge here. And then I am going to mind where the inside fold is here, and I'm going to lower my presser foot. And as I stitch, I'm using stitch number 12. And we will see it, we'll just do a little practice here to see how the stitch works. So we're going to sew, and we're just going to adjust the fold slightly so that we can have it just take a portion of the stitching. So when we look at it, we see that our first stitches did not catch the edge, but our second set did. So we've got, this is what it looks like on the inside, and then when we fold it to the outside, this is what it looks like. So had I been using red thread, you would not even notice those stitches at all, and you can get a very professional looking finish to your garment. So please don't forget to check out our blog, which is at www.wordpress.com, and also our social media channels on Instagram, Janome Life, and YouTube, Janome Life as well as our Janome Canada Facebook page. Thank you so much. We'll see you again soon.